Welcome to Dyspraxic Rosemary Writes, a channel where we talk about dyspraxia, chronic illness, and the writing life. First of all, I wanted to say sorry for the delay in video release. I have been having kind of a hard time this week with my thyroid hormone levels, and I am about to go and seek the answers to that I need, so should be back to normal soon. Today we're going to talk a little bit about inclusive language. This is one that requires a great deal of reading into the subject and such. So I'm going to do the deeply summarized version and talk about this purely from the perspective of things I have learned in terms of what works in my own community, within my own disability community, in terms of how to approach inclusive language in a really respectful sort of way. This is very much in reaction to, I have really seen a growth in my social media feeds, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, in medical professionals. Not all medical professionals, some are great, but in some medical professionals who are very much looking at neurological conditions the old-fashioned way, so looking at it as a disease and a source of illness rather than seeing that there can be some advantages within society. And what I get very frustrated about lately is that of those who are in the camp of being threatened by the concept of neurodiversity. So I wanted to explain a little bit where that has been something that myself personally have connected to neurodiversity emotionally in order to try to get out of the way a lot of the negative discourse that gets online quite often. Since not everyone is familiar with the neurodiversity paradigm, I wanted to start off by sharing with you a few definitions from this movement that are key ones to remember, to truly remember what the values of this movement truly are. And this is from, you see this book right here, Rural Neurodiverse. It's by Sunny Jane Wise. She is an Australian neurodiversity advocate who does a lot of great work in this area. I follow her on social media. I'll link to some of her, both her book and some of her links online. So I'm going to go ahead and read to you a few key terms from her key definitions section that tie into exactly what this movement is all about. The first thing that we have to remember is that of the concept of neuronormativity. And that is a concept that, according to Sunny Jane Wise, refers to a set of standards, expectations, and norms that center a particular way of functioning, thinking, feeling, behaving, learning, communicating, and more as a right way to function. Right, in quotation marks, of course. And that is very much what much of the neurodiversity paradigm is trying to challenge, that of the notion of what is normal in terms of how we think and interact with the broader world. But that notion itself is based on trying to find a place in society for people who are neurodivergent, which is basically an umbrella term that describes individuals whose mind or functioning falls outside dominant societal norms. So basically, in other words, that is everything from your peers who are autistic, to your peers who have ADHD, to your peers who have dyslexia, or your peers who, much like me, have dyspraxia. Neurotypical, however, refers to the opposite of that. So if you don't have a neurological condition and you don't have things like ADHD, autism, etc. And you are the neurotype for which much of society is designed for. The neurodiversity movement and the neurodiversity paradigm are also the two key terms that you need to know about. So the neurodiversity movement, think of it as a social justice movement that is looking for rights, equality, and inclusion for neurodivergent individuals. And the neurodiversity paradigm is about recognizing the diversity of thought as much as we do in terms of gender and race and things like that. Whenever that is properly accommodated, it's often much the same sort of ways of thinking. So in order to recognize the neurodiversity paradigm, really where a lot of the misconceptions amongst healthcare professionals come into play is that it's, yes, you're still recognizing that some form of medical treatment may be necessary, but there is also the social layer too of supporting neurodivergent individuals and not defaulting to stigmatizing them in all aspects of society. The misconception amongst a lot of healthcare professionals is that in the process of accommodating those individuals and recognizing their social rights and also recognizing their strengths, the element of medical treatment is forgotten about, and that is definitely not true. Really where a lot of these tensions between neurodivergent individuals and the medical professionals in which interact with them every day occur is because of this whole principle of the medical versus the social model of disability. So the medical model says that someone is disabled by their abnormalities or deficits, and the social model says that someone is disabled based on their differences in comparison to the environment, attitudes, and attitudes of society itself. So society itself creating the barriers through how all activities, all public spaces, all communities themselves are designed. Now that I have gone over a bit of the basics, I wanted to go over more why I always gravitated towards this framework myself as soon as I learned about it. It very much came to be in the era in which I was just diagnosed with dyspraxia. And I didn't know about it back then. I didn't know until much later in the movement, but to be honest, but when I got older, it really helped me work on some self-confidence and self-esteem issues established through having the neurotype in which I have and interacting with people who weren't accepting and accommodating enough. And I think the reason I have very much gravitated towards these principles is because I always grew up hearing about what I can't do. I always grew up hearing about all this fear-based mentality of what I'll never be able to accomplish, what my life will look like in comparison to my peers. And it took me years to really realize, actually, that's nonsense. If I am in an environment that is supportive and designed in such a way in which I can thrive, if I have the language to say when I need support and what that looks like, then many of the things I want to try and do are things that I can very much do as long as it is done in a way in which is accommodating towards my difference in neurotype. But if you learn nothing else from this video whatsoever, the one thing I want you to remember is that ultimately language is a very individualized thing. And especially when it comes to disabilities, people very much have their own preferences based on their life experiences in terms of what they prefer to be called and how their life experiences have looked in terms of their health conditions and how others around them have taught them to navigate these conditions. And so I very much urge you to not police this frame of thinking, especially when it is people who live with these conditions themselves. I hope you found that helpful. And if you liked what you heard about today, like and subscribe, and happy reading, happy writing, my friends.